Hi and good evening, everyone. My name is Albert, and this is Vlogs About Nothing. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your night to join me. I really, really do. And let's jump right into it. So, I want to talk tonight about banks. On a show where you host topics that concern nothing, let me tell you, sometimes there's obvious ones, but not so obvious. And let's talk about banks a little bit more. So, I am part of a generation that is still, pro bank in that I realize the absolute necessity for there to be actual brick and mortar banks that are in charge of handling, paper money and just financial transactions in general. I say that because recently there's been like a huge shift to go to commercial, large scale, quote unquote banks, like places like Chime and stuff where there's actual no brick and mortar to it. And technically, they're not really banks. I mean, I'm not sure as a punchline on a joke, but if anyone's ever been financed for a mortgage, like on Zillow with Chime as their primary banking app, I'd be very curious to know. I mean, obviously, if you got hundreds of thousands of dollars, I suppose, sitting in the Chime account, then that's what it is. But I bring up Chime not because I hate on the alt banking apps, right? No, I think Chime is great. I think what's more unfortunate is that banks don't cater to people that have troubled credit history or any other like a previous other bank that they were unable to square away with or something, and the impact that it has on the people who are not able to get traditional bank accounts as compared to those who do have them and who choose to not partake in sort of the alt bank app revolution, are better off in that the people who are genuine account holders of traditional commercial large scale banks are often treated the best in terms of, well, everything. They actually have brick and mortar places with employees in real life that you can speak with about any of your concerns that you may have as it pertains to your finances. It's just the access to commercial banks in this country is obviously a problem. The people who need bank accounts the most don't have them. The people who could benefit and save the most money from having bank accounts don't have them. I mean, there are situations where people, for whatever reason, are unable to get a traditional bank account and then have to, resort to places where they get charged an exorbitant amount of money to just cash their check. So it's almost just sort of like by the time you get the money from that check, it's, after Uncle Sam and Uncle Sam's little private helpers have helped, there's really not much left over for the person that was cashing the check to begin with. And it may not seem like a big deal, especially if it's just, a couple times. And I guess maybe it's not if it is just a couple of times. But can you imagine being employed and not having a bank account and trying to cash your checks and the amount of fees that you'd have to pay just to simply access your money on top of the governmental fees that were assessed to your payroll check initially? It's tough. And instead of pushing, alt bank apps, I think Congress and the Senate should perhaps like look into easing, methods into or easing restrictions on how banks can decline people for so many different reasons. I think the biggest one is that a lot of people mess up with one bank, and if you mess up with one bank, you mess up with all of them, and I think that's unfair because if we lived in a capitalist system and each bank was different, then wouldn't that bank be like somewhat kind of happy? I mean, it's a higher risk, but they're taking a customer. I mean, isn't that competition? They're taking a customer by making a new customer from an existing customer at an existing branch, and that person could have a real good history with that existing branch before they made a simple mistake. So why is it that banks can collude to actively decline applications from people who have failed at one local branch bank but still need the services of a big bank and are prevented from doing so because of the amount they owe this bank, but can't help themselves to get out of that hole regardless by opening up a competitor's bank account, or an account in a competitor's bank? And so banks are important. If I think we need to talk to young people more about how traditional banks really, really help them out in the future, and how it's not like Zyme, or it's not like Chime, or it's not like, I'm thinking of Zelle and Chime at the same thing, but it's not like any of those sharing apps that, are able to transfer digital money over digital networks. When you need the cash, you need the cash. And we still actually have cash, readily available in the market. And so I think it's just odd that instead of, again, easing restrictions for people that get traditional bank accounts, other alternatives are popping up. But that's what happens. I think that's kind of ironically the cool thing is that when banks or big companies don't offer services, and yeah, it is important for the little, the little guy to make a business that the government doesn't, have, or whatever like that. But again, I think traditional banks offer a pivotal role in modern society as an individual who can then utilize that bank to empower their own sort of existence into existence, And so, again, I would definitely like to see more people talk about easing the restrictions on opening bank accounts at large banks. Because, again, sometimes in life, as it concerns finance, you do need a big bank. You don't, again, the third-party apps are only going to be able to help so much. And when they are able to help, they are going to charge an excessive fee for that. And at least banks have been, litigated into a point where there are reasonable rates affiliated with establishing a traditional bank account to begin with. And so banks are important, guys. I think we should talk about them more, especially, being active account holders of existing large bank accounts, large from big banks or whatever. So I hope you guys have a good night, and I appreciate you watching Blogs About Nothing.